The saying is, there's Russian music, there's English music, there's French music, there's German music, there's Italian music, and there's music. Which means it's German music. The Coriolanus Overture, how many of you know it at all familiarly? Yes.
We just need to the last few days.
Yes.
Me too, actually, yeah. There's a new edition. Oh, I've just been going to the...
Has everybody got the scheme in front of them? Okay, now this is a piece, it's only 7 minutes long, so it's not a symphony, and it's not, but it is symphonic. It's Beethoven at the height of his powers, and middle period Beethoven. He had he divides into 3 periods. There's a period of preparation, one might say an apprenticeship, something like an apprenticeship, and he's already a master as an apprentice, he's already a master. Then there is his maturity, from which come most of his really popular works. There are popular works from the first period, but the second period is the period of the most popular works. And then there's a third period, which runs after the Congress of Vienna, when Europe is settling down from the Napoleonic Wars, and it's the bourgeois life that's coming in. And the heroics of the middle period are no longer quite in place. Beethoven has a fallow period for several years, about 1815 to 1819, 1820. Then he does write some more, and there are some great masterpieces, but nothing like as fertile or as easy as in the second period. He's no longer in tune with the age in a certain way. He was very much in tune with the heroic age of the Napoleonic Wars. He is the Napoleon in music, really, which means he's not entirely Catholic. And that the question of this music abstracts from the question of the faith approximately. The faith won't come too much into it, but music is too important. And the youngsters today are fed a lot of trash as music, and they don't know decent music which has really got something to say, and therefore, and they're not familiar with it, and they tend not to like it. Generally speaking, it's too demanding, it's too meaningful, it's too demanding, and it's what else? It's too ordered. There's too much order. Modern youth has got chaos in it, and it doesn't like order, and it doesn't like music which they instinctively recognize has order in it. Now Beethoven has a measure of chaos in it. You'll hear that tonight. Drama and chaos. That's why he's more popular today, let's say, than Mozart or Bach probably, because he's got the modern drama is in him. For good and for bad, it's in him. But that does mean that youngsters today can recognize their own drama in Beethoven, which they can't recognize in Mozart, for instance. Mozart is very beautiful, and he's not shallow. People think he's shallow, but he isn't. He's deep. But he hasn't yet got that. The drama is only rising in Mozart, whereas it's full-blown in Beethoven. Beethoven is a master because let me try to get this out. Oh, there we go. It's a little like this, let's say. That's let's say that's chaos rising, and then this is order descending. The order is becoming less as the French Revolution begins to work out, The chaos is becoming more as the French Revolution works out. But Beethoven is the most order combined with the most of chaos. There are composers after Beethoven who will have more chaos, like Wagner, but they'll have less order because the order is going down all the time. There are composers before Beethoven who have more order, but they don't have much chaos. Beethoven is, in a way of describing him, is that he combines the most order with the most chaos. And that is the key of his popularity. I think is one way of expressing why he's so popular. He is very popular, certainly with me. And he can, because he has order, and because the youngsters can sense their chaos in him, then they like his music and they pick up order, which they pick up the order that's in him. So he's a very universal. He's one of the universal geniuses, like comparable to Shakespeare. Shakespeare is also a world of contrasts, all harmonized, brought together. Haydn, Mozart and Beethoven were all living in Vienna at the same time. Mozart was the first one to die, then Haydn, and finally Beethoven. But they all knew one another. And Haydn said about Beethoven, I think he tried to give him some lessons, but Beethoven was very difficult to give lessons to. He knew it all. He wasn't an easy pupil. But Haydn said, you've got 6 people inside you. And what is extraordinary in Beethoven is the variety and the unity. The amount of variety which he succeeds in unifying. There are passages of great calm in his music, and then passages of great violence. It's all one. It doesn't split apart. Have a look at this schema for a moment. 1805. We're full in the time of the Napoleonic Wars. The Battle of Austerlitz was 1805. When the Battle of the Three Emperors, when Napoleon beat Austria and Russia combined against him. So it's a heroic period. Also the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805. Now then, you can take, there's a question of what music changes from age to age. Music is an expression of things going on inside man's soul. If the soul is deep, the music will be deep. If the soul is shallow, the music can only be shallow. Modern music is generally pretty shallow. Beethoven is deep. The question is, earlier music, okay, how representative should music be? On the one hand, there are those who say music ought to be abstract. It shouldn't be too concrete. It shouldn't be too tied to concrete things. Others say, no, let music serve to express concrete things. So, abstract or concrete, music can be both. Music stands on its own without having to mean anything, or it can tell a story. It can be used to tell a story. This piece of music both stands on its own as music, and it tells a story. And in fairness, one needs to know the story. The story is, he wrote it, it's one of a series of about 5 pieces, 4 or 5 pieces of music written to accompany a drama that was being put on the Viennese stage at that time by an otherwise unknown dramatist. But of the Coriolanus series, Only the overture really stands out and is still played today. I think the other pieces are hardly played. But the overtures, because the overture has it all in itself. The whole drama is condensed into the overture. So the story is this. Coriolanus was a Roman general about, I think, the 200 or 300s in Roman history, 200 or 300 years before Christ. Somewhere around there. You could easily find out when. Shakespeare also wrote a play on Coriolanus, which is after the series of his great tragedies. It's another tragedy. It's not as famous as Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. It's not as famous as those four, but it comes soon after them. It's got a lot to it. He was a general, a proud general. He was a good general, a successful general. And he won many victories for Rome. And he was leader of the Roman army against the Volsci. The Volsci were a people living quite close to Rome in those days. It was early in the days of the Roman Republic. And he was going to war against he was going to go to war against the Volsci, and the Roman people, the Roman Senate, didn't do him enough honor, he considered. So he became angry with the Romans, and he went off to the Volsci and offered to head the Volsci army against the Romans, against his own people, family, city. So he is coming towards Rome at the head of the army of the Volsci. He's a good general. He's fed up. He's thoroughly motivated against his own country. The Volsci trust him and are following him in order to beat up the Romans. The Romans are all panicked. They send out a delegation from the Senate. They send out a delegation from the people. Forget it. Nonsense. Get out of here. I've had it with Rome. Get out. So, all right, they get out. So they have an idea. Ooh, what about sending his family? So they send his wife, who must be a lovely creature, and she pleads with him, no, get out. Then they send his mother. They send his mother, and Coriolanus melts into a little pool of butter. He is defeated by his mother. So he turns round, he goes back to the Volsci. I'm sorry, boys, I'm not going to lead you against Rome after all. I met my mother, and that was the end of me. So he goes off and with the Volsci, undoubtedly gets beaten up and killed by the Volsci out of disappointment, etc., etc. Rome is saved. Rome has been saved by his mother. So it's that story which this music is telling. So you've got music which very clearly represents the general, angry music, furious, violent, rhythmic, dramatic, and then you've got the women pleading. And the women keep pleading, and you get the contrast of the general. So you've got that under passion. Architectural passion is the first headline you've got there. Bars, bar number 1, 15, 29, 52, and so on. That's the musical bars, which if you write it out, if you get a score of the music, you can number the bars, and then you're sure of getting exactly what corresponds to what. If you read down the passion column, it's the general against the women, all in red. Well, no red. The general is in red because he's so angry, and the women are in a soothing green. So you've got the general's anger, the general's agitation, and then mounting, in the music, mounting, which music can do very well, and then the women's soothing on the rise. The soothing is also on the rise. The general gets back, the general hits back, the women will plead. That's another motive, a musical motive that comes in. Pleading begins, the pleading intensifies, comes under the general's pressure. The general's anger and agitation again, more pressing. In Beethoven's music, often the pressure increases, the drama increases, You can, in a number of pieces, you can pick that up. The general's anger and agitation more pressing. The women's soothing also intensifies. And then the general gets back into the argument that the women will plead. And the pleading is interrupted. The soothing is confident, but it's also interrupted by the general, angrier than ever, but all his agitation dies in a whimper. You can hear that very clearly in the music. So that's the story here in the music, you can see it. Now, over on the left, you've got a completely different problem. The classic movement in sonata form. In other words, the sonata is laid, the music is laid out in sonata form, which stands on its own. And the music stands on its own as music. Of course, there's a definite correspondence with the story, but the music stands on its own. So you can take it either of those two ways, or both. The one needn't exclude the other. Beethoven has framed the story in accordance with the classical frame of a sonata movement. Now, probably most of you don't know much about sonata movement. Mozart and Beethoven and Haydn all wrote many movements. Usually the first movement of any of their symphonies, it will be in sonata form. In the first symphony of Beethoven, the second movement, the first, second and fourth movements are all in sonata form. In the second symphony, and so on. So the movement, the first movement is nearly always in sonata form. Sonata form is a story of its own. I will come to that. Then the material that's been laid out in the exposition, that's the first section of sonata form, the material is developed, durchgeführt in German, pushed through, driven through. You need a pianist on a piano to illustrate how the themes are. The composer takes a theme, elongates it, shortens it, takes a little bit of it, and builds on a repetition of a little bit. You may be able to listen. You may be able to hear how the themes are. The most of this development is on the women's theme, because it's the women who've got the better of the argument. The wife, perhaps to begin with, at least, but then he says no. And then his mother. Then you get the recapitulation. The recapitulation is like you've got an eye, a nose, and an eye. You've got the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation. It's a very simple comparison. I think that's Bernstein. I think it's Bernstein. The recapitulation reruns the material of the exposition. And the key structure is interesting. And then there's a fourth section, which was much elongated by Beethoven, the coda, which in Italian means tail. And the coda will often be something like a second development. It will be further development. So you've got A, B there. Exposition corresponds to recapitulation. The development, the coda, tends to correspond to the development. So you've got a four-part structure with correspondence between the parts. Then, if we break down the exposition, you can see then in green the first subject, the second subject, and then here falling motif, and that's one of the major themes. It'll be, I think, a motif associated with the women. You might dispute that. You could very well dispute this column of how it applies, the column in green and red, how the music corresponds to the story. This is just my imagination of how the story can be made to fit the music. The music is what it is. It's there. Then the exposition will normally consist in a first subject and a second subject. Two main subjects. A subject is a theme. A theme is like a word, melody. A theme in music is what you call a melody. A melody is a line of music. Harmony is the accompaniment. It needs a little machines, just some elementary illustration of the piano. Harmony is the extra lines of music underneath, but it may not be complete lines. In Bach, it's complete lines, complete accompanying lines. Bach is an astonishing mind, is an astonishing musical genius. Beethoven is no slouch. But the strength of Beethoven is the heart, the strength of the heart, the strength of the emotions of the heart, as well as the strength of the mind. And generally, the mind controls and shapes the emotion, which is what, again, the most remarkable feature of Beethoven is how the mind succeeds in controlling the emotion. The emotion in Beethoven can be very strong, but it doesn't usually get chaotic like in modern music. Modern music is ugliness, lack of harmony, lack of melody, no real justification. There's no emotion. Oh, it's horrible. Modern music is horrible. The orchestra players all get indigestion when they play modern music. That's an exaggeration, but it's true. You talk to orchestra players about what music they like to play and what the effect on them is of playing modern music, and they'll either say it means absolutely nothing, or it just upsets me. Modern music is anti-natural. True music is natural. It's a faculty given to people by God, and Shakespeare has one of his characters say, "Don't let people near me who have got no music in them, because you won't trust them." I forget which play it is. It may be The Merchant of Venice. It may be, I can't remember. But Shakespeare understood music. Another one who really understood music and loved it was Tolstoy. Tolstoy writes very well about music. The great Russian novelist. That's just two great authors to whom music meant a lot. And Shakespeare has interesting quotes about music. One is certainly in The Merchant of Venice. If music be the food of love, play on. That's Twelfth Night. So the development. Well, the exposition will turn around two main themes, which contrast with one another. The first theme will often be relatively virile, but all of these rules and generalizations admit of exceptions. Relatively virile, and the second theme will be relatively feminine in the sense of melodic. That suits Coriolanus perfectly. The first theme is going to be the general, and the second theme is going to be the women. It's perfect for sonata form. So you've got the first theme for the general is in two parts. There's a very angry part, and then there's an agitated part. And those will both come in later. The development is going to work, and then there's, at the end of the exposition, there's an addition of falling motif, which I associate with the women, because there's some agitation, but it's how can I say? It has an effect of wearing away, which of course is what the womenfolk did to the general. They wore him away for the benefit of Rome. The falling motif. I'll tell you when it comes. Then the development is mainly the falling motif. He doesn't develop much the first or second theme. Then the recapitulation, you get the first subject, 1, A and B, but with Beethoven, the recapitulation is rarely, if not never, a mechanical repetition of the exposition, which it could sometimes be more or less in Mozart or Haydn. But Beethoven is always thinking, always reworking things, whatever it is, he's reworking it. So the first subject is compressed, bar 152. The second subject is, there are the 5 blows, which are definitely the general. Hammer blows in the orchestra. Then you've got the second subject, which is the flowing melodic theme, the lovely flowing theme, which provides considerable relief from the general's music. But it's repeated 3 times, and in 3 different keys it's rising. Key of C, key of D, key of E. Then there's the return to rhythm. Again, the 4 syncopated blows, which had been 10 blows in the exposition. Syncopated means off rhythm.
One hand.
Yes,
Yeah.
1 and, 2 and, 3 and. Yes, that's it. That's a way of describing the syncopation. Modern music is very syncopated. There's a lot of syncopation in modern music. Syncopation is offbeat, when the emphasis comes off the beat. Beethoven uses it quite a lot. Beethoven is very rhythmic. He's a master of rhythm. He also writes lovely melodies. He's a master of melody. He's a master of harmony. He's master across the board. And the second subject comes back then, and again, like the exposition, it finishes on the falling motif, which leads into the coda, which starts with the falling motif, and then it starts also with the second theme, the first part of the second theme, 2A, and then the climax comes with 6 syncopated blows, followed by the falling motif, fortissimo, and then at the end of the coda, parallel to the end of the development, but now for the first time the general is broken, and you can hear that the theme da, 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 becomes da 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 dee dee da 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 boom boom boom. That's the end of Coriolanus. It's a tremendous piece. Okay, shoot. 1A. General's anger. General's agitation. Mounting. Ten blows. The women pleading. F, in the key of F. Key of G. Return to rhythm. The general hits back. Syncopated blows. The falling motif. Development. So it's the pleading interrupted by the general. pleading intensifies. It's the falling motif. Recapitulation, the general's anger again. Agitation. Pleading in C. Rising to D. Rising to E. Return to rhythm. The general hits back. 1, 2, 3, 4. The falling motif. Coda. Pleading interrupted. The soothing is confident. Interrupted. Broken down. That's it. I think it's pretty clear. But what I hope you can sense also is that you could listen to the music on its own. It's already got enough interest in itself, even if I don't know the story. If I know the story, it comes to life, let's say, or it comes more to life. It can come more to life. But the music, the interest is very much musical as well. Then there is a third column. Well, why don't you just play the whole thing again? Listen once again, and put it a bit louder, if you can go a bit louder. It's very easy to picture the army general. It's not very melodic. The violence goes straight into the soothing. We're into the development. sometimes it gets slower. Hardly hear that last bit. Now, this is music of the soul. There's a lot of soul in Beethoven's music. It's not empty music, it's full. What is it full of? Jan.
I was going to ask you that question. Can this of itself be any good? If it's not taking me to God, if it's not bringing me up towards Him. I said this to an artist friend of mine, a hugely talented sculptor, who's done wonderful religious work. And to be perfectly honest, some of his ideas are fascinating, his technique is brilliant. But if it's not elevating me to God, why should I care? I have football. So, as my distraction. If this is not elevating me, bringing me to
Understood,
God. Yes.
understood.
And this is what I'm wondering, because otherwise it's playing with my emotions again. It's playing, it says drama. But is it, if recreation is for me to rest, to then come to God again, I'm probably going off and completely...
No. Think, all I can say is think of others. Think of modern youth who are listening to music far inferior to this. Far inferior to this. So before I can start climbing from there to there, I've got to climb from here to here.
Yes. So it brings them order. It brings them...
It's bringing order into their emotions.
Yes.
Or into the listener's emotions. It's taking very violent feelings and giving them shape and frame. I mean, I accept what you're saying, that, you know, Beethoven is not as high as even perhaps Mozart, although he's got qualities, certainly qualities of positive qualities that Mozart doesn't have. He's got much more breadth and depth, but not much more breadth, but definitely more depth than Mozart. There's more seriousness in Beethoven than there is in Mozart. And Mozart is serious, make no mistake. But Beethoven's a lot more serious. Beethoven is grandiose. Yes. There's something grandiose, there's something noble here. Yes? Mm-hmm. Modern youngsters, what do they have noble in their lives? Not much. So, for my money, as Americans say, if a modern youngster can get used to this kind of music, get used to listening to this, he's going to be in a far better position to begin listening to Mozart and Haydn and the earlier music. He's going to be I won't say he will listen to it. He may refuse to go further back than Beethoven simply because there is no drama.
No, he may come back to it later in life. He was giving it to him early in life, as I was given, even though I rejected it for a while. You come back to it, it's familiar.
Yes.
You're not completely...
It's very important that they have a familiarity, because they can't love what they don't know. But what they get to know, what they're given to know, which is why, you know, St. Paul says something like, everything, it's in Philippians, everything noble, everything high, everything of good name, repute, get into these things, says St. Paul, in order to get out of the muck. So this is getting out of muck. This is a concept, a feminine concept of women. It's not some masculinized, horrible masculinized modern women, right? Boys today need to learn what women should be and what they should be about. They don't know, they're not taught. They're taught that there's absolute equality and the two are just completely interchangeable, which is false. And a girl is never going to learn what she can achieve in a marriage if she knows how to look after her man. And if she doesn't treat him as automatically her inferior or her competitor to whom she must prove that she's superior. You knew Julia.
Yeah. You know, the actual contrast is so clear in the music.
Yes.
From masculine to feminine to
Yes.
plurality.
Yes, it is extremely
Absolutely
clear.
clear.
No, and notice that there's an objectivity in music.
Yes,
That
because I'm a
is to
complete
say-
Philistine and I get it. If I can get it, anyone can get it.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, you're done, that's right. We all are. But in Wagner also, does anybody here know any of the operas, the great operas of Wagner? Yes, yes. Again, there's a lot for youngsters to learn. Just one example. The first act of Götterdämmerung, which is the last of the four operas of the Ring. The Siegfried and Brunhilde are on the top of the mountain, and she is sending him down the mountain to perform heroic acts. She's going to stay on the top of the mountain. She's going to stay at home while the man goes out and slugs it out with the big bad world. Do youngsters learn that anywhere? No, the women is just as much to go out as the men, right? And the women must go out as much as the men, in fact. And she must prove that she's better than he is at doing what men do. Yes.
Would you say that someone like Beethoven has value because they might bring somebody to the principles of the faith? Or would you say that the act itself of Beethoven bringing so much beauty into a piece of music, would you say that that has some inspiration of the divine, even if he may not have been conscious of it himself?
I'd say both. I'd say both. You're right. That many people, Pope Pius XII experienced God. For instance, the slow movement of the last F major quartet. Pius XII was inspired by that. So Beethoven himself felt himself very close to God. It's not the Christian God, but it is the God of nature. He loved nature. He was always out walking in the woods, communing with nature in the woods. I'm not saying that got him to heaven, was enough to get him to heaven. But that is in his music, especially, of course, the Pastoral Symphony, number 6. And it is a reflection of God, without any doubt. And even this music is, there's nobility in the anger of the general, and there's nobility in the pleading of the women. Beethoven is noble. Much of his music some of the melodies are extremely noble. I'd like to sing them, but I better not, because you wouldn't get much idea of the nobility. But there is a great deal of nobility. Also in Wagner there's nobility.
I won't let's get too sidetracked with Wagner, but then you think that there's an element of whereby both Beethoven and this is able to harness the emotion and convey it, as you mentioned, with objectivity, and I think Wagner through the leitmotifs and sort of the coordination does exactly the same. But still, music, when you're listening to it actively in the opera house, also has a very objective sort of quality to it. We all listen to it, we all feel the same emotions. But when we then listen to it on our own, usually when walking, I wander about, listen to reference, then it has a very subjective meaning. And you start to think about the music again and again. That's, for me, what differentiates Wagner, Mahler, Strauss, Beethoven from the early composers, because you can keep going back to it and you keep listening to it in different ways. And I think that's where the genius comes from, much more so than Mozart just creating brilliant, simple melodies. But then that, I think, is the more important part of the music than the objective. Being able to, for us all to listen here to quite a clear sort of dichotomy between tension and conflict. But it's more about when we listen. If we all went to listen to this once a day for the next 10 days and discuss it in 10 days' time, we'd have very different opinions on the piece of music. I think that's the true beauty of it.
Modern music in the modern way. Yeah, you're talking about musicians after the French Revolution, but before the modern nonsense, in between the two.
Yeah.
And you're saying that towards the end of that period, the music is subjective, or the real value of the music is subjective.
I think it becomes it. Yes.
Yes. But the music remains objective. I was going to say it's objective because you're not going to portray violence with melody. You're not going to portray soothingness with rhythm, with strength of rhythm. The rhythm the rhythm generally is more masculine. The melody is liable to be more feminine. Because every man has a head and a heart, every woman has a heart and a head. So both elements are there. The music, so we go probing further. The music is not strictly, but only broadly programmatic, because it is also independently musical. It's not essentially programmatic, so that without the program, it's nothing much. It's real music standing on its own, plus telling a story. It stands on its own as music. Question: what then is the musician's soul do? What then in the musician's soul does the general stand for, and do the women stand for? This is soul music. What's going on corresponds to things in the soul. What does the general stand for in the soul? What do the women stand for in the soul? I've already said it, really.
Charity.
The women love, yes. The general doesn't stand for love. He's standing for... What's he standing for?
Revenge, anger.
Revenge, anger,
Spite.
pride. But besides that, what is there noble in the general's music? If you say that the general's music is noble, which is what I've been saying, what in the general... What?
The willingness to stand for his honour.
Yes. The willingness to stand for a cause. He's standing for, which is what men are meant to do, absolutely meant to do. Russian proverb. Man is the tomato stake, woman is the tomato plant climbing up the stake. What the stake is meant to do is stand. What you young men must do is stand for truth and honour, for truth and justice and honour, which many young men today no longer even have an idea of. Would the general's music give them an idea of that? Yes? Yes. So you don't want to kick your women around. No way, Jose. It's not a good thing to do. But stand. Don't be a dish rag. Don't be dish rags. Stand in the right way, in the right place, according to prudence, against COVID. Take your stand wherever, however, and give the women something to hold on to. Give them a lead. Give them values. Give them honour, which they can hold on to. Because if the man is also a tomato plant, you've got the two tomato plants twisting around one another in the mud. That's where they twist around together, in the mud. And the stake points to heaven. S-T-A-K-E. What do the women stand for in the general? In love. I think that's yes. They're standing for love of country. They love Rome. They're pleading for family. The women are pleading for family. That Coriolanus doesn't come into Rome and smash everything up and go to kill all the children and women, which he's liable to do. If his general's anger gets going, that's what he will do. So they're trying to head off trouble, and they succeed. In this, they succeed. In this presentation, they succeed. They may not always succeed.
They nag him to death in the end, yeah?
I'm sorry?
They nag him to death in the end.
Yeah, Gianni, you're naughty.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that, yes, you see. When do you resist nagging and when do you not? When should you give way to nagging and when should you resist? That's a good question. What then does their clash represent? All is not harmony in the musician's soul. There's a clash going on.
Fight between good and evil.
Life is good and evil. The women are all good
Right.
and the generals are all bad.
It's about death and destruction.
Death and destruction.
And that's evil. And they were about
Yeah.
love.
That's a version, yes. That's a version. There are times when the men have got to go to war. That marvelous poem in English of the 17th century. My love, I could not love thee half so well, loved I not honour more. That's profound. Love, I couldn't love, that's his girlfriend. He's going to war. It's a poem by Lovelace. Look it up in the collections of English poetry. Lovelace, Lovelace. Time of the English Civil War. A love I could not love thee half so well, loved I not honour more. It's only because he's going to war to do his duty that he's got an upright soul capable of properly loving his girlfriend. Do the boys today hear anything like that ever? Would they respond if they heard it? They could respond if they're led into that old world of honour, of virginity before marriage, and so on, of delaying sex, etc., etc. That's a whole world. Dr. White, who knows David White, who knows the American teacher who taught literature for many years in the Naval Academy, Shakespearean heroines, because they've not got that world in them. That world just isn't in them. They don't know what a girl hanging back until marriage, it doesn't mean much to them. It just means unnecessary privation and wasting a lot of years when you could be enjoying yourself. That's all it means. So what marriage used to mean, what it can mean, how men can treat women, all of that's kind of closed. This doesn't get into that. Shakespeare does present virginal heroines. Beethoven wrote one opera, and he had a very high idea of marriage and a woman. And the opera is called Fidelio. Fidelio is a boy's name for a girl. And the heroine is a wife disguised as a boy in order to get into the prison where her husband is held captive. And she finally gets down to the dungeon where he's being held. She recognizes him. They sing, of course. In opera, they're always singing. You may have heard what Mark Twain, who's an American humorist, what he said about the music of Wagner. He said, I like everything about Wagner's music except the way it sounds. That's funny, actually. I love everything about Wagner's music except the way it sounds. If you don't like the way it sounds, if you don't like the way music sounds, what is there to like about it? Come on. But that's what Mark Twain said about Wagner. Of course, it's true. I mean, Wagner's music has a, dare I say, a repulsive side. It repels by its length, by its relative lack of melody, but there is at the same time much greatness in Wagner, uncontestably greatness. And there are noble melodies, and there are old-fashioned ideas of relations between men and women, etc., etc. So, next one. What does the clash represent? We haven't answered that. Anybody got an answer? Well, it represents the drive towards honour and the drive towards love. Love of family on one side, and duty to country on the other. There's a clash between the public life and the private life. They've have to be reconciled. So it's a clash between mind and heart, really, which are not always perfectly harmonized. Does the clash seem to get easier or harder as the music goes on? Somebody else answer that. Alan, so I know your name. Do you think it's about the same voltage all the way through?
It seems to be about the same voltage. It doesn't seem to change too much until towards the end.
Yes, I think that's
But we
right.
don't know why he changes at the end. Because you can't really tell when the mother starts to intercede.
Yes, the mother is not distinguished from the women here.
No.
It's not that kind of detail and that kind of photography of what's going on. The music is not a photograph. It's a general idea of the story. It's not a detailed correspondence, exact correspondence. For instance, the falling theme you might apply to the general. I've applied it here rather to the women, but what is it in his soul that's going on? There's something inclining to disorder, and then there's a definitely feminine element which inclines to pacify the disorder. I'd say, if anything, the music gets a bit the clash gets a bit harder at the end, and of course, finally, the general is brought down. Is it a clash with a right and a wrong? Who might be right and who wrong? Is it a
Depends
clash
if you're a
with a
man
right
or a
and
woman.
What?
Depends if you're a man or a woman.
Sure. Yes. So.
No, but you identified pride. Pride is wrong.
Yes. The result, if the women hadn't succeeded, there would have been bloodshed. And Rome would have been brought down, probably, because of the quality of Coriolanus' generalship.
I think there's a point probably about just coming to the end of the music where he realises that he's wrong, but then he realises that the consequences of him backing down would be catastrophic for his honour and for his position, and so he sort of wants to continue and thinks maybe I should do this, and he becomes extremely angry. That's where you get the syncopated blows near the end.
Oh yes.
And then once his reason has fallen, his emotions can be reached much easier. And I think that last passage before the end really demonstrates him collapsing on all sides. And I think he is wrong, but he's not wrong to have stood against Rome for some time. And I think it would have been equally as wrong to ignore the lack of recognition that he had in the state to some extent.
You must read the Shakespeare play.
Yeah.
Read the Shakespeare play. It's a classic story because it's hitting on the individual, the family, country, and relations between all three. And I think you're right in a number of things you say. Yes. Is it right and wrong? It's wrong to shed blood without good reason.
It's not a noble cause, is it? It's out of pride. It's not. No, but he switched sides for what reason?
No, his honour is involved.
Yeah, his honour, which is
Honour is not
pride.
Yeah.
Honour is not necessarily pride. I could not love thee, loved so well, loved I not honour more. He wouldn't be fighting for his country without love of his girl. Or,
He's switched sides, hasn't he?
Coriolanus.
Yes.
Yes, but the Romans at least partly deserved it, because they failed to honour him. Oh, read Shakespeare.
Okay.
But why did he need that human respect? Sorry.
Because any general, any high servant of his country needs respect from his country, needs a corresponding respect in order to go on giving himself, even sacrificing himself for his country. That's not unreasonable. It's for the common good if he is respected. And it's not for the common good if he's not respected. The proof is he goes off and fights for the enemy.
Would it be no better choice to say, well, I'm not going to lead the army and see what happened with the enemy, instead of switch parties?
We're getting away from the music. Read the Shakespeare. Does the clash resolve in this piece of music? Hans Apel thinks it does.
Yeah, he's dead.
Hans will think it doesn't. Interesting. Division. Yeah, the more think that it does than think that it doesn't. Hans Apel don't think. Yeah. If so, how? How does the clash resolve? Those that think it does resolve.
I think it resolves more through resignation. It's not quite as clear cut as sort of Berlioz' March to the Scaffold, where you hear the head falling off at the end, but it's that slowing of the motif and the cellos at the end again and again, which is sort of, okay, I will not go through with this. I acknowledge I'm in the wrong. I will change, which you sort of
Yes.
go there. And it's the whole slowing down, it, just from a tempo perspective, from the speed to just nothing at the end, which is great.
Yes.
I don't know if he's written Calendar or Smorzando in the score, but it certainly just ebbs away, as you said, melts to butter. There's nothing left of sort of the pomp and circumstance that you have in the
Yes. It's a resolution which isn't a resolution. The honour is not what's right in the general order. Doesn't survive.
He doesn't triumphantly concede. He concedes through a weakness of his heart when he sees his mother and wife.
Yes.
And nothing happens in the end. He doesn't kill anyone. You know, he is killed, but he's killed in a sort of, you know, in a, what is it, like a fight afterwards. You know, so nothing that's conclusive.
It's kind of self-sacrificing way that he's killed.
Yeah.
It's kind of self-sacrifice because he knows the Volsci are not going to tolerate him, obviously, because he has betrayed them, so to
I
speak.
think that the music ends, but the story is clearly not a resolution, and there's no answer to the question which has been asked by Beethoven in the piece.
Yes. If the clash isn't resolved, what follows?
The humiliation of general.
He's going to go on with this unresolved clash inside him, which you might say Beethoven's music does. Because the clash is in the same clash. Well, last question it is. Do you know of any similar clash anywhere else in Beethoven's music? I know at least two pieces.
The Eroica might be one, the Third Symphony.
Third Symphony, yes. Yes, the heroic symphony. How does the clash end there?
Well, it's the depression that he has when he was writing the symphony for Napoleon, and then finds out about the terrors, and the sort of slaughter that Napoleon orchestrated in Paris. And so he writes the second movement, which is the mourning, the sort of the death march almost of
Yes.
Napoleon, and that has a very similar fizzling out at the end of just the drums, the timpani
Is that where the symphony ends?
No, but the symphony doesn't end then. That's true. But at the end, there's more of a there's a fugue, I think. But the second movement has a very similar feeling to this one in terms of how it fizzles out, and there's no answer to the question which he has to answer.
Yes, at the end of that second movement, the end of that funeral march, the theme of the march breaks into little pieces.
Yeah.
It's almost sobbing, but it's broken into pieces. It's a great piece, the funeral march. It was played at Padre Pio's funeral, so somebody else thinks that there's a connection between Beethoven and the faith. I wondered if it's right music for, but that was obviously somebody looking at Padre Pio as a human hero, which he was, amongst other things. Well, that's much less what the top of it, the most of what he was, but he was amongst other things. So I would say it was justified. And how does the clash result? Well, I'll tell you one other piece where the clash is fierce, and that's the Appassionata Piano
I was
Sonata.
about to say that as well.
The Appassion, which was Beethoven's favourite, and even the Moonlight Sonata, which is also very famous, and both of those end how?
They end with the E major. It's a G minor chord. It's one that wasn't allowed to be used in medieval Europe because it was so dark. Yeah, tritone. That's it. Yeah. I can't remember but that was the harmonic ending.
No, I don't think so. No, it's a straight minor chord, I think, just a classic minor chord.
Okay.
But I remember once I had a pianist come to the seminary in South America to play, and he played it in rehearsal. He went through the third movement, and he said, "That destroys a man. That music destroys a man." Lenin loved the Appassionata Sonata, which is not a good sign. It's dark. The music ends in the force of darkness prevailing. It's not a sweet. And the Moonlight Sonata, same thing. Ends in a somewhat tempestuous minor chord, classic straight minor chord, tumbling down the piano in the Moonlight Sonata. The Appassionata, I think, similar. So that was the same passion, and you get moments of melody in both. That in both the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata and in the Appassionata Sonata. The first movement, also the Appassionata. I wish we had a few more recordings to play. You haven't got any of the Beethoven sonatas on disc, have you?
Computer.
You have that. You can. Might put it on computer. Yes, yes. Play the first movement of the.
I'm a drummer, but yeah.
You're not bound to like Beethoven. A lot of people find him too stormy. Go to YouTube and then just punch up, search Appassionata. And they will almost certainly take you to the Sonata Beethoven. Nowhere else does that word get used. Go home if you like. If you're tired, go to bed. Go to bed. Don't hang around. But if you're absolutely welcome, of course, to stay, but you're not bound to stay. It's the first movement is a good.
I'll find a good recording for you. But you have Wi-Fi. No.
Sviatoslav Richter is good. And somebody else came out and listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Da-da-da-dum. He said, I couldn't find my head to put my hat on. He was so upset. Turn up the volume. This is the beginning of the third movement. Then we'll listen to the third movement. Syncopation. The voltage is pretty unrelenting in this movement. Is there much melody in all of this? Is there melody in that? It's just a keys. To the recapitulation. This is a kind of rest. It starts up again. That's a moment of harmony.
The passion.
The sprint to the post. How's that for finish? Who is that?
Maurizio Bellini.
Oh, Maurizio Bellini, yeah. Italian. Is it the same clash? Is there something there of the same clash?
Yes.
Well, there's not the melody and rhythm being distinctly shown against each other. They're mixed in one all at once, just a huge storm.
Yes, the melody is built into the rhythm, so to speak. Yeah. So who wins there? The general or the women?
The general.
Yes.
Because if you base it off tempo, it's this idea Beethoven has said the Durchdrang, the constant drive, the constant moving forwards and so forth.
Yes.
Even when you briefly had sort of the slow arpeggios and scales, it's always then interrupted with...
Do the women get a word in edgeways here?
Not really.
Not really, no. But it isn't the general and the women. That's the Coriolanus story. But it is something of the same clash in the soul. So what is that clash in the soul? What's it between? Which way has modern music gone since Beethoven? Has it gone the way of the women or has it gone the way of the Passionata?
You have to work hard to listen to this. You don't have to work hard to listen to modern music. It's not pleasing to the ear. There's no work involved. I don't know how to explain that.
No, that's right. Well, there's nothing there, so to speak. I think the answer is that modern music has gone the way of this, where the melody, the rhythm is driving out the melody. The rhythm is conquering the melody. Mozart says melody is the heart of music. This music is losing the heart of music. It's unmusicking music. Now, there's Beethoven was the great-grandfather of rock and roll. And he is the grandfather of the destruction of music. The destruction of music is in it. And modern music will go the way of its destruction. It will run itself into the sand. It will become nothing. It's becoming nothing here. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's rhythmic. It's brilliant. It's very expressive. But that pianist in Argentina said, it destroys a man. He played it at full blast, full voltage. At the end, he realized that this music was destroying him. That's how he described it. And he's basically right. He was basically right. Beethoven's favourite sonata. So what does that tell you about Beethoven? Well, where does the clash end in a blaze of glory? The same clash in the Fifth Symphony. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Well, if you like, play the last part, the fifth movement of the fourth movement of the Fifth Symphony.
But for Ivy.
Sorry?
That'll do it. Put Ivy next to the symphony, that'll do it.
The fourth movement of the Fifth Symphony. And I think you'll sense something of the same clash, but it ends differently. It doesn't end destructively like that, in a way, does. Many pianists would say, I wasn't destroyed by playing that.
I just type IV next to fifth, okay.
Interestingly, isn't rock music divided, being slush and violence? There's a very slushy part of it, where the melody's gone out of control, and then there's a very violent part where the rhythm out of control. There he is, that's him. How many of you know this? Is the rhythm there? Yes. Is the melody completely gone? No. Oh, bother.
The next bit's really good. Next one.
Development. This is the build-up to the recapitulation. coda, and the sprint to the post. Is there something there of the same clash? Why there's something similar. To go to bed, the slow movement of the violin concerto, just peace and quiet. A few lovely variations on a lovely theme to show you that Beethoven's not all violence and horror. The slow movement of the violin concerto in D major. This is the melody. Orchestra on its own. Top volume. There's the violin. The violin is embroidering on the melody in the orchestra. It's haunting. Second variation. Third variation. They're not letting the music breathe. This is an interlude. It's very beautiful. Should be very beautiful. Another variation.